Okay, in this recording, we're going to look at the other side of the coin, so to speak. We're going to look at, I suppose, the international dimension of youth work. And while we've made this distinction for the purposes of explaining, I suppose, how development education is perceived in developed countries, and is, I suppose, quite developed country centric in one way, and these would be the definitions that we dealt with earlier. These three definitions look very much at the international dimension of development education. And we're going to look at international youth work, we're going to look at global youth work, and we're going to look at global justice in youth work. So looking at international youth work to begin with, the important thing to be conscious about in this definition is that the definition is very much rooted in European Union a perception of development education and international youth work. So it comes from the EU. So most of the international youth work programs, exchange programs, speak to this particular definition, or owe a lot to this particular definition. Sorry. So the general definition: it promotes young people's active citizenship in general and their European citizenship in particular. And this is enormously important because increasingly the concept of development education and international youth work is tied up with that concept of citizenship. Some people feel it's very positive. Other people would be uncomfortable with it because it distinguishes, perhaps, on case, people who are perceived as citizens and people who are not citizens. So it makes that distinction. That's one, I suppose, critique of it. The other critique of it is that it looks very much at your role as a citizen in terms of your responsibility, so your global responsibility, and that's a really positive thing. And many people, when they would be looking at youth addressing issues of sustainability and global justice and global development, and want to nurture responsibility on the part of young people. Young people might say they're happy to take responsibility, perhaps, but that a lot of the challenges that they're taking responsibility over were not of their making. So the concept of global citizenship, and particularly European citizenship, as is outlined in this particular definition, is important. This next dimension to international youth work is around solidarity and tolerance among people, and particularly around social cohesion within the European Union. And again, social cohesion within the European Union is an important policy platform of the European Union. It's important, it's seen as being important, and what we mean by social cohesion is that the different nationalities within Europe see themselves as having a European identity. So it's not just about collaboration between different nationalities, it's about having a common shared European identity. And again, international youth work speaks to that particular objective. Fostering mutual understanding between young people hopefully is reasonably self-evident in terms of what it means and why it's beneficial. And then the objective of contributing to quality of support systems for youth activities. Now, I mean, the reason that's important, or is perceived as being important for the European Union, is that there's a huge diversity, or is perceived to be huge diversity, in terms of the type of services that are provided to young people across Europe, and that those countries where those services are more developed are seen as being a resource to help those countries where there's a way to go in terms of youth work and youth supports, that there can be mutual learning in relation to that in both directions. And then I suppose the final objective there is around European cooperation in the field of youth work. And again, a lot of the programs, Erasmus Plus being one of them, but there's a whole range of programs out there which are actively supporting that type of collaboration. but it's important to be aware that the purpose of that funding is to speak to the objectives above it. So when there's European cooperation, it's not for just the sake of cooperation. It is to increase European citizenship, it's to promote social cohesion, it's to foster understanding, and it's to collaborate to build better structures for the delivery of youth work across the European Union. Okay, so if we look then at global justice in youth work as a concept, what global justice in youth work looks at is it's looking at that concept of globalization, and it's looking at globalization. And when we talk about globalization, we'll deal with globalization again at another stage in the course. But when we look at globalization, what we mean is the terms of trade, the terms of communications, and the mechanisms by which people are interacting now on a global level on an ongoing basis. And again, there's a lot of criticism of it, and there's a lot of support for the concepts of globalization. And a lot of the, I suppose, challenges that maybe globalization presents to us are around things like globalization within the economy, which tends oftentimes to favor the stronger economies over those that are at an early stage in their development. The other issue around globalization is oftentimes around around the homogenization, of international culture. So it's the Anglification and the Americanization, or the Chinification, if that's even a word, of culture because of mass communications. So that concept of globalization and how it impacts on young people's realities is enormously important. The other thing about global justice and youth work is that it's based on principles of informal education, which is very much about youth work, promotes consciousness and action, and it challenges oppression and promotes social justice. Again, very similar to the other definitions. The last point here is important in terms of global justice and youth work, is that it is located in young people's realities. And this is important because a lot of the other development, education, and international youth work definitions that we've looked at seem to be presenting themselves as educating young people towards acting. So in some ways presenting a reality of the world outside of young people's experience and encouraging young people to respond to that as responsible citizens. Whereas the emphasis here is to look very much at young people's their lives, and to look at how globalization, development, sustainability, all of these concepts impact on young people and how they respond to other young people's lived realities. So I suppose that is a distinguishing characteristic of these particular definitions, which is important. Okay, so if we look, and we have our Professor Sala in the presentation, the YouTube clip that we looked at went through these, and there's a whole range of different definitions out there, and it's nice to have ones that have sort of a catchy theme, so to speak. So if you look at the definition from the Development Education Association in the UK, it talks about the need to connect, challenge and change. And again, those challenges are those dimensions of development education or global youth action or global youth work should be self-evident. Woolley then, who has written extensively on development education, has come up with another I suppose, optic for development education, looking at the overlap between global issues, global experiences, and global perspectives. And in the center is global youth work. And then the overlapping area looks at how different issues can be dealt with, how people can experience perspectives, and how their perspectives can be integrated into their lived experience, and then how your local experience or your local perspectives can be globalized, so to speak. And then another framework that Professor Sala presents is about values and attitudes, knowledge and skills. And again, it's those overlapping concepts between the knowledge, skills, and attitudes. Okay, I just want to present very briefly here Trocra's definition of development education, and global education in particular, global development, global justice in youth work. And if you look at this optic, or this graphic, it has an awful lot of information in it. But if you look, it's about acting, exploring, and thinking. And at the center of it is a social conscience. But and that when we talk about a social conscience, we mean values. We mean people's capacity to have empathy and have an understanding and take a position with respect to the plight of other people. So there's a whole range of different ways of looking at how you do development education then around empowerment, action, justice, creativity, imagination, and making connections. All of those things are seen as being important in promoting the concept of global justice in youth work. Okay, so I suppose to summarize and to begin wrapping up, why are we looking at development education in youth work? And one of the reasons is that obviously it's about informal and experiential learning, and it's about looking at new things. It's about people looking beyond their own lived experience, and young people in particular. It's also about generating curiosity in people's minds, and that young people be co-producers of knowledge. That consciousness and action is also very important. And again, Professor Sala